I'm continuing to work on my Raspberry Pi model railway GUI application. Program written in Python using PySide 6. I've spent about a week refactoring the code, during which I've updated approximately 1,000 lines of code. But this wasn't about fixing bugs or adding any new features. So what have I achieved, and was this a waste of time that I could have spent adding new features instead? First, a bit of an explanation. What do I mean by a week of coding, and did I really update 1,000 lines of code in that time? So it's actually been over a week, but this is a personal hobby project, so it's much less time than if I was doing this as part of a full-time job. I've been working on the code in the evenings, and typically 2 or 3 hours most evenings. I've been working on 2 projects previously, but because of the progress I'm making on this and I'm enjoying this one so much, I'm pretty much exclusively working on this one at the moment, so I'll be coming back to the other one in future. In terms of 1,000 lines of code, my branch merge shows 978 line insertions, although I started the refactor before I created the Git branch, so 1,000 lines of code should be fairly accurate. It also shows the deletion of 645 lines of code. Some of that will be code that's been moved from one class to another. Although even then, as I've moved them, I've had to rewrite a lot of that code, either to reflect change to variable names or removing references to other classes. So what is refactoring? Why did I do it? And was it worth it? So this is the definition from Wikipedia. I'm not going to read out the definition. Essentially, it's about restructuring source code without changing functionality. So you can read that as not adding any new features. Technically, I did add a small feature during the refactor, but it was only a few lines of code added to test part of the new code to make sure it behaved as I expected it to. So essentially, the code is still doing the same job as it was before I started the refactor. As I've already mentioned, this isn't about fixing bugs, but whilst bug fixing is not the intention of refactoring, some bugs may get fixed, noticed and resolved during the change. But there's also a risk that new bugs will be introduced during that refactoring process. So it's not about adding features, and it's not about fixing bugs. So what is it about? Refactoring is about making code easy to read, easy to maintain and debug, and a more flexible code base. The flexibility of the code base was probably the priority for me. I'd go further, and it was specifically about decoupling the code. Basically, for a GUI application, I had so much of the code tied into the MainWindow class, or that was accessing classes contained within that class. For example, I had code that was calling the API, and to find the API it would go through the MainWindow, then to the API class, which was coupled to the node classes and back to the API. Really bad spaghetti code. It's worth noting that this isn't the first time I've refactored the code in this project, but previously it was changing the architecture for performance reasons, whereas this is a better example of refactoring, where it's just about changing the code to help future development, rather than fixing a particular issue that happens at the time. To fix these problems, I wanted to decouple the code to remove dependencies between the different classes. This involved significant changes to the code architecture, including creating an event bus that publishes events to the various parts of the code. This fits in really well with the use of CBus, which is event-driven at the hardware level. Using this event bus, it receives the CBus events from the API and application events from interactivity within the GUI application, and then allows the different parts of the code to monitor for these updates and updates itself accordingly, using slots for the API and the GUI windows. I converted the devices class into a domain model. This uses a singleton pattern, and this creates a single class that can be updated from the API and interacts with the other parts of the code. For instance, allowing the values to be read by the graphical interface. And then I followed through by separating more of the graphical parts into a view model. Previously I was passing the main window as a reference to the other classes, and where possible I've now removed that. By separating these out, it should make it easier to continue to develop the code. The next feature is to further develop the layout part of the GUI. The interface to the right of this GUI is shown, and that will provide a way to interact with features such as point motors. I've already started working on that now. With changes to the code base, this should be much easier than trying to incorporate it into the way that the code was written before. In summary, the change took a reasonable amount of time, but I expect that it will more than pay for itself in the long term. Refactoring should be a standard part of developing code. If anything, this is something I should have done earlier, as I already knew that the code was starting to get complex and that I was doing things that perhaps were not optimal. I may have saved more time and I made that decision earlier. The project is now back on track and hopefully progressed better now. I'll be providing more updates in future, so if you've not already subscribed, please do so. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you on a future video.